First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody this morning who's given their time to be at this second annual Summit for Jewish Small Communities. And thanks to all our presenters, I'll be introducing them along the way. I'm Ed Horrich, I'm Chief Executive of Jewish Small Communities Network, and welcome you all this morning. We had responses from around 50 communities wanting to attend the conference this morning or interested in catching up with the results. We are going to have a number of presentations this morning from CST, from a project called Edut 710, from the National Library of Israel, from Jewish Leadership Council, and from one of our small communities who we could have picked a number of communities to ask. This particular community was one that responded in our survey, and so we are using that as a touchstone to encourage debate from the rest of you later in the morning. The second annual summit could only be, we always take an important topic. Last year it was welfare and well-being, and the looking at the provision around the country, and that's a project that we are continuing to look at in partnership with Jewish Care, and I'm very pleased to welcome a number of representatives from Jewish Care here this morning, and Julia will be joining us on the panel later on. This year it's quite clear that there could be only one topic, and that is, of course, the 7th of October last year in Israel, the attacks that occurred and its fallout in the UK's small communities since then. They faced a number of challenges and have to come up with a number of different types of response in order to carry on as they want to, really. It's been a challenging time. And in respect of that, we have two messages. One which came in on Friday from a representative of the UK government, aimed at one Shabbat, as you know and can see on the screen. This weekend is one Shabbat weekend. We had Friday night Kabbalat Shabbat, we had Havdalah, and we had communities all over the country marking the 25% of the total Jewish population here, which does not live in a big conurbation. Lord Khan, the faith minister, sent us a message for that, but it pertains to our summit here today.
Hello, I'm Lord Wajid Khan, Minister for Faith in the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Shabbat Shalom to everyone across the UK taking part in this year's One Shabbat. Strong communities are vital, they connect us and foster belonging. The Jewish Small Communities Network does fantastic work in uniting diverse Jewish communities who are together informing, supporting and celebrating your unique history, culture and traditions so we all might encounter them and learn. And your efforts extend beyond the Jewish community, promoting interfaith dialogue and understanding. By bringing people from different backgrounds together, you help build a more resilient and united society. Thank you.
I think it's very important that the UK government is listening to us through various different channels, through our through the Jewish Small Communities Network, through Jewish Leadership Council and the Board of Deputies as well. And last year we were privileged to have the keynote speaker, Lord Eric Pickles, and he has sent us a message indeed for this year as well. When he sent it, recorded it, he happened to be in Auschwitz. But it is a very pertinent message that he delivers.
80 years ago, Europe began to understand that the heart of the continent had been ripped out. Europeans would never be the same again. The UK is fortunate to have a vibrant Jewish community. You're a fundamental part of the British identity, central to what makes our nation tick. By valuing the community, we support ourselves. The last few months have been trying and difficult, bigotry and intolerance stalks our streets. I firmly believe that we can overcome the anti-Semitism. Better times will come. Until then, hold on to the things that matter, friends and family.
A pertinent message from Lord Eric Pickles there. Now then, many of you very graciously completed our survey about what's happening in your areas since the 7th of October, how you felt before and how it has affected you since. We are going to present a much extended summary of those results on our website in due course. We just completed, we took in the last results a couple of days ago, so we need a little bit of time just to complete the summary, absolutely. But now I would like to take the chance just to give you some highlights from the survey itself. So first off, we asked what the sort of challenges were that you faced. And you can see from the charts here, what leads the way is that relatives and friends in Israel who are close to you were very heavily affected, over 56%. After that, street protests and demonstrations really affected you a lot. Local anti-Semitic incidents, around 40%. And a number of other things, as you can see in the what's represented here, all amounted to you being affected, your well-being affected, how you felt about the world. Almost 50%, 48.1% of you felt very, very affected. It is a small selection, but it's typical of the sort of response that we get when we put out a survey. We had 81 responses from all over the country. To look at some of the details here, have you withdrawn from any of your normal activities? Yes, 40% of you have withdrawn from doing the things you'd normally do. How did you rate anti-Semitism prior to October the 7th? Well, you can see the average rating there is relatively low. After October the 7th, 128% increase. Shocking. Were expressions against Israel in your community prevalent before October the 7th? Whoops. You can see the 125% increase. How secure did you feel prior to October the 7th? The average rating is 8, really, really, really high. After, it goes down absolutely massively by a third. How supported did you feel generally by the public around you? Not too bad. Okay. Before October the 7th. Afterwards, again, almost 30% down from that. And you can see the spread. People are getting quite nervous. How supported did you feel by local councillors? Not too bad. Local councillors actually fare quite well. Not so supported quite so much, but it's just an increase in your concern about how much they support you. But it's gone down. Your MP, not so much. MP's a bit more staying on the same path. How much do events in other locations affect you locally? Quite a bit. But they're somewhere else, aren't they? How much do you feel comments and reports in press and media have affected you somewhat more? Well, that's a quick run through of the summary. Like I say, we'll have a more detailed analysis, which we're going to present in due course, probably, hopefully in about a week or so. But we couldn't have this summit about October the 7th and its fallout in the UK without talking about what has happened in Israel. And being as it's almost 12 months since the 7th of October last year, and so much has happened to so many people in Israel, so many people being killed, being affected, being displaced. We wanted to look at that before we started about talking what's in the UK. And so I was very pleased to talk recently to one of the co-founders of a project called Edut 710. And I'd like to welcome him this morning. Eliza, if you can spotlight Ite. I want to welcome Ite Kentor, who is going to tell us about this project made to record the testimonies of people following October the 7th. Ite, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I must admit that it's really fascinating, to be here because an honor to be here because, we in Israel, we're so overwhelmed with the daily actions that are taking care in Israel that we hardly have time to look for the effects on the outside. So I feel privileged to hear a little bit about the effects of October here on your communities. So thank you again for having me, and I'll try in these 15 minutes to try to tell a very, very big story. So my name is Itai Kento. I'm a filmmaker and educator. I make mainly documentaries. I produced many films. Many of them have shown in many, many countries, also in the UK, and I also directed quite a few. But when people ask me what is most famous thing that I've done, I will say the Yad Vashem Museum presentation. Maybe few of you were there in Yad Vashem. In 2005, they opened a new exhibition, a new building, and all the films there I produced, and some of them I directed. So I have a rich background with dealing with Holocaust survivors. And I also produced a film called A Film Unfinished, which won many, many prizes and shown in many places, which told the story of the Nazi propaganda film that was filmed in the Warsaw Ghetto 1 month before the deportation of the ghetto to Auschwitz. And within this film, we try to check the tricky relationship between memory, footage, and the truth. It won many awards. And I also produced and directed some other films about the Holocaust. October 7, as everyone else in Israel, found me unprepared and shocking. And I had a soldier in my house. He got a very, very immediate call to go back to his base. I knew quite a few people who were the kids and children were at the party, so we start worried for them. And as every other person in Israel, I asked myself, what can I do? For many years, I used to serve in a reserve duty and in the military as part of the reserve duty, but I'm too old and I didn't feel I can go and fight again. And I was involved in many. I teach in Oranim College. We train teachers, and we invented some media community-based or communities based on media projects. And one of my colleagues gave me a call and said that I have to go on Zoom meeting. And on October 9th, a group of volunteers from different fields, filmmakers, social workers, psychologists, managing finance people and researchers. We knew that our mission and our goal in this event is to create the video testimonies archive of the October 7th. And I'll show you a short clip that shows a little bit of what we do and our achievements so far, and then I'll continue explaining.
דבר אליי.
בסדר, טוב.
אנחנו מעדות 710.
תספר מה שאתה רוצה.
רציתי לבקש מעידן שישתמש בנשק עליי. שלא ייתן להם לקחת אותי, אבל לא יכולתי. הוא הילד.
כשהבן שלי שאל אותי, אבא, יהיה בסדר? אנחנו נהיה בסדר? לא אמרתי לו, יהיה בסדר.
הייתי בטוחה שכולם מתים, שהילדים שלי מתים. כאילו לא ידעתי שיש אופציה לצאת מזה בחיים.
ובשלב מסוים זורקים פנימה רימוני רסס לתוך המיגונית.
במהלך כל הריצה, פעם אחת לא הסתכלתי אחורה.
אני מזהה דמות מולי, ממש בשבריר שנייה.
אז הוא הסתכל עליי, פתח עליי באש.
ב7 לאוקטובר אני הפסקתי להיות בן אדם פרטי. אבל אם הפכתי להיות חלק מההיסטוריה של מדינת ישראל, לפחות בזה תרמתי משהו.
צריך לספר את הסיפור הזה, אין מה לעשות, שהוא לא יישכח לרגע.
As you, I think that you understand a little bit what we do, but I will say that we're not, we're not coming on an empty ground. As we all know, we're experiencing now the most traumatic event of the Jewish people in the state of Israel since the Holocaust, and we all know that there is a crucial role for the testimonies and the visual and documenting the testimonies for the future recovery of the culture and the people, because we're still in the trauma. Our theoretical approach and ethical values are based on Professor Dori Laub theory. Professor Dori Laub was the first one to take testimonies from Holocaust survivors. His collection of testimonies are in Yale, in Fort Knox Archive in Yale University. And the approach says that every victim is there waiting for someone to come to listen to him or her. And we have, back then in October 9th, we set up ourselves 4 goals. The first one was to be there for the victims, to let everyone who experienced the events of October 7th firsthand, he was there or she was there, to let them the chance to tell their story without interruption and with full listenings. And if they agree, to let us publish the story. I will say that part of the recovery from a traumatic event is gaining control of the story, constructing the story for yourself, and getting recognition of the story. And the video testimony enables all the 3 of them. The people, it's, I'm sure that Israelis were not such a strong listeners. So for many people, our teams and volunteers that comes there are the first people and the first chance to tell the story from the beginning to the end without interruptions. And we have no hierarchies of stories. Every story counts. Everyone who was there allows, we want to have his story without any specifications. The second goal is to make these testimonies accessible. As again, it's another thing that we learned from Holocaust survivors' testimonies that were buried in archives for years, and most of them have not published to the audience till today. For us, it was clear that the testimonies has to be published to the public and accessible for the public. Again, if the witness themselves are allowing us to do so. But in order to digest all this amount of testimonies, Every testimony we upload to the web in a long version, the original testimony, and a short 5 minutes version so people can get a wider perspective of the event. The third goal was that we think for the future. We don't only make propaganda and upload the short clips for social media or YouTube or media, but we think about the future, and every testimony gets all the metadata that is needed for the future and research. So we can also today take information from the data from the archive and get some above a wider perspective of the testimonies. And the fourth goal was that we want to keep on professional values and shoot in 4K and good sound, so it will be able to use the testimonies in the future, and also in good ethical values that every person is giving the approval of the testimony before we upload it. You can get the feeling of what a testimony look like, and I also give a glance of the website. I would say that the Hebrew website is much more developed than the English one, but the idea is that you can look for testimonies by location or by name, and if I'll go to all the testimonies and I'll collect, there's also a map that you can see how many testimonies were uploaded from each settlement or each community or each city. And when you go to the testimony itself, you have the short version, but you also have the long version and a short summary of the testimony. In some cases, you have also the transcript, so you can read and jump. You can click and jump to the corrected place on the testimony. We also did communal work, because what's going on, that the families, the people in the community, they do not know the story of the community, because they all experience their own experience of the event. They sat in a safe room. So I have some community-based projects, either by screening the testimonies, but more complicated one is that we reconstruct the fight and the struggle in each city and each community with the fighters and the first intervention fighters who were outside. That, just to sum up, I will say that for 11, in the peak of our work, we were 400 volunteers, and we still work and operated by volunteers. We are about 200 active volunteers. Only 2 weeks ago, we started to have someone, the first person that on payroll, and that we are on a stage of raising money for the project, because it's really, really important. We see it as our mission for the Jewish people, and we also give a lot of effort to make these testimonies available to the public, not only on the website, but we also have activities. We have lectures for organizations, either in Israel or also outside Israel, either by Zoom or physical. I myself gonna attend and lecture on an event on October 10th in London. So if you have people there, I'll be happy to put the invitation. And if you think that you should have me also in your community, so I'll be happy to talk with you also. I will be in London on before and after Yom Kippur. And we also, last week, we developed an online platform that enable people to create their own event, discussion, or a ceremony based on our website and testimonies. It was developed with Microsoft team, and I will be also attending the panel later on, and I will be happy to share a little bit also about this. So, and ask your question and answer your questions. So thank you.
Itay, thank you very much. We're going to, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions in the panel later on. And just to reiterate, Itay, it's going to be here in this country around about the time of Yom Kippur. Edut 710 is working in collaboration, I think, with the Wiener Library, and that's part of it when he comes over. And they're very, very interested in coming to communities or talking to communities one way or another directly about the project. I'm sure we'll be able to distribute details after the event via email for those who want to get in touch. Please do feel free to email me, hello@jscn.org.uk, about Edut 710 or any of the presentations, the work that you are encountering this morning in our summit. So now we're going to introduce Timna Abramov from the National Library of Israel. Timna contacted me recently and to talk about collecting, to archive what has been going on in the diaspora with regard to October the 7th. So I welcome Timna now, and she would like your cooperation. That's the key element of why she's here today. But she's going to explain what the project that she's doing is and how you can help. So welcome, Timna.
Thank you very much. I just have to warn you guys, I am so horrifically technophobic, and I'm gonna try and share my screen, and you guys will laugh at me because it's gonna take a long time. Okay, here we go. Okay. Okay. So I'm basically going to start by just introducing the project as a concept. It's called Bearing Witness. And the purpose of Bearing Witness is to document the October 7th disaster, the massacres, and also subsequent war in Israel, but also across the Jewish diaspora. And the reason why we do this is because I think we all know from the very existence of this meeting that what happens in Israel doesn't necessarily stay in Israel. I mean, we've already seen the effect of the fallout in terms of the rise in anti-Semitism, but also in terms of, on a more positive note, the way that the communities come together. And one of the nice things about my job is that I often get to see this. I often get to see recordings and pictures and footage of people coming in solidarity with victims in Israel and with victims abroad too. The very existence of CST and the incredible work that they do lends a really interesting and I think quite touching element to the situation. But before I actually go into talking about the project, I want to discuss people who are doing it. So I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Timna. And what I do at the library is I'm the diaspora coordinator and selector, which means my entire job is to basically find information, find material, and find things to document in the European diaspora, especially in Western Europe, so the UK. But the people that I work for, the institution that I work for is National Library of Israel. And I've taken this part of our mission statement to discuss basically what we're here for, so to speak. So it's to collect, preserve, cultivate, and endow the treasures of knowledge, heritage, and culture in general, with an emphasis on the land of Israel, the state of Israel, and the Jewish people in particular. So basically, what do? We collect, we preserve, we make sure that everything that is collected and preserved can be handed onwards to the future, to generations in the future, and that it's accessible, because there's not much point in having the information stored safely if nobody can look at it. And one of the things that does set us apart from other libraries, national libraries in the world, for instance, the British Library, is that we try to be as democratic with our information as possible. So we do a lot of online access, and everything that we collect, we want to be as available to as many people as humanly possible. But I think that shouldn't be taken for granted, because the idea of a national library or a national institution which is intended to preserve information and documentation about Jewish people everywhere is something that's quite new. And when you look back into history, there are many situations in which we don't have evidence that survives. And that happens a lot with Jewish people, especially. And that's because of a variety of issues that are quite unique to us. So, for example, assimilation, or on the opposite end, such a lack of assimilation that there are small closed-up communities that don't leave behind any record. There are languages that become extinct. My own grandfather spoke Judeo-Aramaic, which is no longer a spoken language by pretty much anyone. And these are some pretty unique challenges. And the National Library's mission in that respect is actually not to be taken for granted. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that what it does is kind of preserving a Jewish value, the value of memory. As Jews, we're constantly doing things without really realizing it that are supposed to promote cultural memory. When we have a Brit Milah for a baby boy, we're actually trying to remember Akedat Yitzchak, the sacrifice of Isaac. Every festival that we have pretty much is based around some kind of story that we're trying to commemorate, whether it's the Agadah of Passover, whether it's Megillat Esther for Purim. Every week we have the Kiddush ceremony where we say Zecher to the memory of the escape from Egypt. In our holy texts, we have all these calls to remember Amalek. For example, we're told not to observe the Sabbath and keep it holy, but actually in the original Hebrew, to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. We commemorate our dead every year with a candle and by going to the grave, but we also commemorate as a people on Tisha B'Av, for example. And I put down this quote from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who wrote, "To be a Jew is to be a link in the chain of generations." And I'm kind of coming to all of you today as linked in that chain. I have, I think, about 30 different people here, all of whom should hopefully represent a different community or represent a different organization. And each one is a link in that chain, and that is the chain that I'm trying to preserve and trying to record. So back to the project itself, Bearing Witness. It's our library's project to archive the events of the October 7th massacre and its aftermath everywhere. And eventually we hope to become the largest and most comprehensive archive on the subject. And when we have this gigantic archive, which is going to be partly hopefully online, partly in person, and it's fully accessible and anyone can come and anyone can see it, we're basically going to have a really important, I don't want to use the word weapon, but we're going to have a very important resource for future study and for the commemoration of these events. And this is something that I think, again, should not be taken for granted. Because people forget rather how short the human memory is. So a personal anecdote here. Not long ago after starting this job, I kind of had this moment where I was like, were things actually that bad during the beginning of the war? Which sounds a little bit funny because of course they were bad, but I sort of just started to forget about it. And then when I came into this job and I started looking at the materials that had already been collected, I realized that there were a bunch of screenshots from a website called Sidecar, or an app called Sidecar. Sidecar is an app where one can anonymously post whatever you want. You can post sort of words, sentences, that kind of thing. And because it's anonymous, obviously brings out the absolute worst of humanity. And we saw all these really horrific statements that were kind of in the realm of similar to what we saw in Alex from CST's presentation, that kind of were calls for violence against Jewish people, calls for murder against Jewish people, and so on and so forth. And it kind of reminded me, the human memory is very, very short, and preserving it is really essential. And in the modern world, we have the extra challenge of the fact that our material is digital. What does that mean? First of all, there's so much more of it. We can't, I think people 100, 200 years ago couldn't dream of the amount of material that we have. The average person creates and leaves behind a paper trail so much bigger than that, the generation before it or the generation before that. We have digital footprints now. And those digital materials also disappear really, really fast. So not only do we have more, but we actually have almost, we have both less and more. We have more to collect, but also more to lose. So for example, social media websites can be hacked into, web pages can be corrupted, things can be taken down, things can just get lost because there's so much of it. And these challenges mean that we really have to have someone who's paying attention and making sure that everything is archived properly. And that's what the National Library is kind of here to do. So in terms of what we're collecting, because we often get asked this, you say documentation, but what does that really mean? I've deliberately left it quite wide and quite sort of undetailed, really. Anything that documents the experience of Jewish communities across the diaspora as a consequence of October 7th and the war, anything within that scope at all is fair game. And the reason that I'm leaving it wide that way is because, first of all, I want the maximum authenticity that I can get. So I don't want people to feel like they're looking for a certain type of documentation, or that I only want to see a certain kind of documentation. No, I want to see everything. I want to see all different kinds of opinions. I collect from anti-Zionist Jews. I collect from very Zionist Jews. I collect from religious Jews. I collect from secular Jews. I collect from organizations, from individuals. Absolutely anything that falls into that scope is fair game. That's the point of an archive. There's no agenda. But also because when we deal with Israel, we know roughly what we're looking for because we were all here. But when it comes to abroad, we actually sometimes don't know what a community has to offer because we don't know what you went through. And that's why typically when I speak with a community, I actually speak with them one-on-one first, or not with them, but with a representative from them one-on-one first, because that way I have a chance to understand what this time has been like for you. And then together we try to understand what documentation there is over there. When I say that you know best what your community goes through, it also means the kind of documentation. And we're looking again for everything. It could be musical, it could be written, it could be digital, it can be absolutely anything. And some extra guidance for anyone who wants to deposit. When I collect a material, I want it to be the closer to the original as it can be. So, for example, we sometimes get people who say that they have a Word document where they've copy and pasted things that they found on the internet, and then they want to give me that. So it's very, very well meant, but unfortunately, it actually isn't especially helpful. That kind of thing is so decontextualized that it can't really be considered documentation. So if you're, looking at websites where there are these important things, I would much rather have the link. And if you happen to own the website, to even have copies of any, for example, PDFs or images that you put on there. If you, for example, are the rabbi of a synagogue or you run a synagogue and you have all of these posters that are kind of calls to action, I would rather see them than see the website by itself, and I would rather have both if I can. Having said that, this stuff can get quite technical, so if you have any doubt about what you want to send in, just send it in. I want to see it. Worst comes to worst, we can choose to not collect it, but I definitely want to see it. When it comes to the kind of forms of media that we collect, audio, video, photo, digital, written material, anything that's been scanned is all very welcome. And we want a great variety of diversity. So I'm going to give you some examples of what we have collected already. First of all, you've actually already seen one, which is over here, this sticker. This used to originally say, "Believe Israeli women." But after it was stuck, somebody kind of struck out the Israeli parts and made it into "Believe Women." So this is an example of how both the material here, so to speak, is the sticker, but the context of somebody having stuck it up and then having had it kind of rubbed out, it's even more fascinating. And this is going to be really useful to future generations to see, because it shows both how Israelis responded, or how Jewish people responded abroad, and how non-Jewish people responded to them, and presumably non-Jewish people responded to them. Another example that we have is this is actually a really wonderful example, but it's from Israel. We had a scan of a notebook written by a soldier that was to his family, and it said at the front, "Open if I die." And he did in fact die. He was killed in northern Gaza by an explosion. And you have his actual handwriting telling his family not to worry when he's gone, telling his sister that if she ever wants to talk to him, she can talk to him, and he'll try his best to listen even after he's gone. And these are the kinds of really touching pieces of documentation that will get lost if they're not archived now. Now, in the UK, you might not especially have that. You might have that too. There are many people in the UK that have family in the IDF, or family who were affected directly by the events. But you might have your own diary. You might have a diary that has an entry of how you were treated at work, for example. You might have you know, if you're thinking about moving to Israel, you might have a document for Nefesh B'Nefesh trying to move out. If you're part of an initiative or community initiative, then you might have the brainstorm of how you were to respond to these situations. You may have posts that you put on social media asking for people to donate. You might have had a fundraiser. It might have been a fundraiser that was on a more personal level among your family. Or it might be a fundraiser that you did as part of a larger community, like a synagogue or a community center, anything like that. I can't tell you what you have, but these are just a few guesses. And this is the last point, metadata. This is probably the most important point that I can make. Whatever you send in to me is meaningless if there's no actual context behind it. So I can see a picture, for example, that sticker that I showed you, but if I don't know where it is or when it's from, it's pretty much meaningless. So the more information that you provide about whatever it is that you happen to send in, the more valuable it becomes. And this again is stuff that you really can't take for granted, because we often think that what we're saying is quite obvious, but you'd be surprised how quickly people can kind of forget and how quickly the context can become obscured. So now that you have hopefully a slightly better understanding of what we're looking for and how you can help, I'll put you onto how we're collecting. So I doubt that you have, but you may have seen a barcode or a link to a form online. And we do have an online application form, which is basically something that we have for everyday individuals. If people just happen to see it and happen to have a picture in their phone that they may as well give to us, then we do that. But in situations such as this one, where I'm speaking to a variety of people who are in good contact with small communities or organizations, whether it's CST or Jewish Care, you have actually a wider story to show me. You have an angle on an entire community. And in that case, we want to get your story directly to us because we want to make sure that we don't miss anything. So if you are sitting there and you anything to yourself, oh yeah, my community in, for example, Leicester, faced lots and lots of things, and I have plenty of documentations that I could show you. Don't go to the form, go to me. We can talk on the phone, we can talk by email. I'd love to get in contact and then we can discuss how to go forward from there. And if this is you and this describes you, then you have my email over here. I'm also going to put it in the chat of this conversation, and I'm also going to hopefully send an email afterwards to remind you guys. And if you don't have anything that's kind of big to show me, but you do have a few pieces of documentation, then you have the barcode that you can scan to be taken to the form. And I think I'm slightly over time, so I'll leave it there.
Ed, you're on mute.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you for reminding me to unmute. Yes, so if we can just unshare the screen. Timna, if you, maybe I can do it from this end. There we go. So yes, Timna is welcome to join us later on if you've got the time. If not, then definitely we will be sending out notes after the meeting. It might take us a few days, so bear with us. But thank you very much. And if you do have anything, and I imagine that this actual summit could in fact be something to archive as well, as there will be a recording. So but I'll leave that up to Timna. Thank you very much. And please do continue to use the chat to make comments or to put questions or to share instances from your own communities. Now then, we've got our last presentation before lunch and before we go into open discussion. I very much hope that, I mean, we've got a good room here, we've got 34 people in the room. I hope you're all going to stay for our discussion after a short lunch break. But before that break, we have in fact, sorry, 2 presentations. And the next one is from the JLC, who, in the light of the 7th of October and the obvious effects that were being caused in this country, embarked on a project to address that. And I'd like to welcome Claire Mandel from JLC to tell us about Forge for the Future, what that is all about and where it's going. So good morning, good afternoon, Claire, and over to you.
Thanks. Thank you, Ed. I will do my best to share and make this work. Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here also. And as Ed just said, some of you may be familiar and may have heard of it, whilst others may not have heard of it at all. And so that everyone is on the same page, I'm just going to start by introducing the context of where Forge the Future came from and its core objectives. So it's Forge the Future, as Ed said, is a strategy for the UK Jewish community post-October 7th, as was developed during a community conference that was convened by the JLC in February of 2024, which was attended by more than 150 lay and professional leaders from across the community, bringing a wide range of different perspectives, who listened to one another and considered our long-term strategic challenges together in the context of our post-October 7th reality, where there may have been gaps in the community's response to it and gaps in our wider communal provision. And the idea was to come up with possibilities for new forms of action and to encourage the conditions for innovation and community mobilization. And so on the back of that, the JLC came up with our Forge the Future community plan, which was launched at the end of March this year. And that you can see from this slide is built on 4 strategic objectives to be delivered through 9 implementation projects. And as you can see from here, the Forge the Future's overarching goal is to ensure that the UK Jewish community continues to thrive, to contribute to British society, to live in safety and harmony in the face of unprecedented challenge. And that the four strategic objectives sitting within this are these 4 in the middle of this house image: empowering and supporting next generations, winning support and allies, ensuring fair media coverage, and enforcing our legal rights. And these are the 9 Forge the Future implementation projects. I realize it's small font, don't worry. I will come to them with larger font now, and so my plan is in this short time to trot through and as Ed said, to trot through the 9 projects and update you on progress made so far on each of them. And just to stress that it isn't the JLC doing all of the doing across all 9 projects. We are engaged in some of the doing in some of them, but in a number we are working across the community in order to ensure that the necessary infrastructure, thinking and funding is in place, in line with the JLC's overriding strategic purpose, namely to maximise community collaboration and cooperation, much like what Alex talked about before with the CST. It's very much our approach to work across the community. And so where appropriate, we're outsourcing to and working with the most appropriate community partners to deliver actions within each of the projects. So turning to the first strategic objective of empowering and supporting next generations, I'll say something of where we're up to with the 2 projects sitting within this one. Project 1 aims to support young people, by which we mean young people aged 16 to 25, to strengthen their Jewish identities and connections with Israel, located in today's complex reality. We've built a working group made up of lay and professional leaders who've spent time working with young people, either in formal or informal education spaces, to use that group both as a sounding board for our delivery plans and to provide us also with some help along the way with hands-on delivery. We've also created a parallel professionals group, bringing together 12 experts currently working in the area from across the community. And we've had an initial roundtable discussion to get their views on young people's immediate needs. And our key learnings from that conversation included recognition that whilst this past year has been very tough, and in particular for Jewish students on campus, that much resilience has been demonstrated, and in fact, the levels of engagement of students and young adults in this past year were in fact higher than they've ever been. There was a strong desire for Jewish young people to come together for allyship and solidarity, to be held, to identify and to connect. And it was also acknowledged that in order for us to maintain engagement across the wide tent of our young people, we need to support those right across the political spectrum of the community. In Project One, we've also commissioned the Institute for Jewish Policy Research, JPR, to do some bespoke research that involves a deep analysis of data that they have from their National Jewish Identity Survey from 2022, and where they're specifically going to be investigating the impact of different Jewish formal and informal educational interventions on the identities of British Jews into adulthood. And so the idea is that this research will allow us to rank and prioritize educational interventions, both formal and informal, and explore how to grow and amplify those which are shown to be most impactful. And within Project One, our planned next steps are between October and January of between October of this year and January of 25, to run a series of focus groups of different cohorts of young people within the age range, in order to understand from them directly what of the provision that is already in existence in the community they have felt to work for them, what hasn't, and what pushes them away from wanting to engage with Israel or more broadly within the community, and what might draw them in. And we plan in the spring to follow this with a one-day summit for young people, at which we'll present all of the various data findings that I've mentioned, that we'll have obtained by that point, and use the opportunity to seek their views on the data. And the aim of this event will therefore be to engage and empower young people, working with them rather than for them on this whole initiative. Turning to Project Two, which aims to make schools and universities feel safe and positive academic environments for Jewish students, affirming of Jewish identity and experience. So some of you may have read about a new organization, the Intracommunal Professorial Group, that was established in May of this year, whose purpose is to research and analyze the experiences of Jewish students, academics, and staff at universities throughout the UK. They've already built up a network of more than 50 academics, and over the summer, they put out a student survey in partnership with UJS, Union of Jewish Students, on students' experiences of anti-Semitism since October 7th. And their report on the survey findings is due to come out imminently. Also, I recently attended a roundtable convened by UJS, obviously being the kind of central players for Jewish students, but believe me, there are many others doing campus provision of all different types. But the roundtable that I attended was convened by UJS with multiple other Jewish organizations who do operate on campus there, to share their plans for the year ahead and to discuss whether there was felt to be any gaps for student provision. And then separately, I, through the JLC, convened a meeting with UJS, with CST, chaplaincy, as well as CEOs of the progressive movements, a representative from the Board of Deputies, from the ICPG that I've mentioned before, and also a member of our Forge the Future Project 7 legal action group that I'll come to shortly. And the point was to discuss, to understand and just hear from each other. There's so many different organizations. It's one of the blessings and one of the complexities of our community, how many organizations there are in the community. So to share amongst with these core organizations, what actions and interventions, campus interventions, each had taken over this past year, and to discuss campus strategy for the year ahead, specifically where more streamlining and coordination across these organizations and others makes sense, and in fact where it feels worthwhile for various organisations to continue to work on the same issues, coming at them from slightly different angles to maintain suitable pressure where it's thought to be needed. And on the schools front, one of the key next steps within Project 2 is liaising with the Board of Deputies for them most likely to deliver a survey of Jewish pupils' experiences in non-Jewish mainstream schools, which I guess will be relevant for a lot of your communities, being in places where there are not Jewish schools, in order to establish, understand their experiences post-October 7th, and to establish key areas where they need support, and for the community to have data to use when meeting educational providers or making representations either to Ofsted or government or whatever. Turning now to the second strategic area, which is winning support and allies, under which projects 3 and 4 sit. So project 3's aim is to build networks of external allies across civil society via internal ambassadors. And so far, what we've achieved is we've built a detailed project plan and a bank of resources for how this might be achieved. And it's included mapping of targeted sectors and then organizations within those sectors, and engaging a group of lay leaders as ambassadors, with the goal being for them to approach influential leaders at these organizations. And the intention is for our ambassadors to discuss ways that the organizations can address anti-Jewish racism, as it's known outside of the community, and how senior leaders can address this internally and support their Jewish employees. And we're now embarking on a pilot phase to test the model that we've built. And I would say that if there's anyone on this Zoom who you believe have strong contacts with senior leaders within large organizations across any sectors that you may be engaged in, and by senior leaders we do mean kind of CEO level, and you feel you can help us to facilitate these introductions, please do be in touch with me. Also to mention that we've been working on a Jews in the Workplace survey with Work Avenue, which they put one out in November 23, and we've been working on a kind of repeat of that, so to speak, 1 year on, that will be put out in the coming weeks, most likely by Work Avenue in partnership with the Board of Deputies. So the aim of Project 4 is to build a multifaceted, proactive, positive messaging campaign about British Jews to a mainstream audience. This is one project that we haven't yet launched, but for which we've had interest expressed by people coming from quite interesting and diverse experiences. And so we do hope to get it going soon. However, as part of Project 4, there are already plans to pursue what was called Jewish History Month. It might change. It might become either Jewish Culture Month or Jewish Heritage Month, which did in the previous government receive government support. And we know that from conversations with Lisa Nandy more recently, it's got government support moving forward, and it's a project that the Board of Deputies will be leading on. And if you're familiar with noting the ubiquitous nature of Black History Month, Pride Month, and others like these, and the effect and impact they have across schools, as well as organisationally across the public and private sectors, we hope that if and when this comes off, it will create a significant platform for positive engagement. Turning now to the third strategic objective of Forge the Future, which is ensuring fair media coverage, under which projects 5 and 6 sit. We of course appreciate this is immense and can feel overwhelming, but that said, we don't feel that it should be ignored, and steps are being taken to address it. So the aim of Project 5 is to build a joined-up reactive media and comm strategy. Work has already been done into developing a new communications outfit that will coordinate media messaging across the community, working closely with BICOM and others to counter extremism and anti-Semitism, to significantly improve the community's reactive media response, and to offer also more media training. And more about this will be shared in the near future as this new communications outfit prepares to launch in the coming weeks. And also following a series of discussions that the GLC has had with both BICOM and CST, we've been working on a proposal for a public opinion research project to be done to assess the views of the UK society's what we call the mighty middle on issues of anti-Semitism, extremism, Israel, and so on. And subject to securing the necessary funding, our ambition is to get this started before the end of the year. And the intention is that the results that come from this public opinion research will have kind of multiple utility across various of our projects that I'm referring to. Moving now to Project 6, whose aim is, again, it's a tall order, but to somehow support British Jews engage on social media platforms. We've so far had a number of one-to-one discussions with various community members interested engaging in this, and we plan to imminently bring together a small group of interested parties who have expertise across a range of AI, monitoring extremism and anti-Semitism, and communications strategy skills more broadly. Our goal is to bring that group together very shortly to start discussing strategy for initial ways to approach this mammoth task, both from an offensive and a defensive perspective. Turning now to the FTF for the Future's fourth strategic objective, which is enabling us to effectively enforce our legal rights, under which Projects 7 and 8 sit. So Project 7's goal is to establish a JLC community legal action group to triage and coordinate legal activity. And to a degree, this has been achieved insofar as a legal triage, a legal action group has been set up that's made up of 10 solicitors and barristers from across the community who have different specialisms, and all of whom have been engaged in one way or another advising on anti-Semitism matters since October 7th. So this group has been set up to review potential cases and consider whether they are of sufficiently strategic import to the community at large, and to recommend, and if they do, to recommend that the community puts human and financial resource behind them. And on the back of this, the group's recommendations, there have been 2 or 3 matters that have already been taken forward, addressing issues impacting issues such as universities and Jewish schools. And in some instances, recommendations are being made by the Legal Action Group to prepare community organisations well for more political interventions, even if not fighting specific legal proceedings. And elsewhere, action is being taken to ensure that the community will be preemptively well prepared as and when a specific anticipated case does in fact arise. And we're also now turning our attention to building up a pool of other lawyers who are willing to take on occasional pro bono cases, to whom we can field other less strategic, but not necessarily less, but still important cases. And so if people know of lawyers that you believe would be open to taking on any of this kind of pro bono work, please be in touch. And to Project 8, which is in fact very much the JLC's business as usual, which is working with politicians to ensure the Jewish community has legislative and regulatory protection, both nationally and locally. We have at the JLC an excellent external affairs team who work tirelessly on this from week to week, did so pre-October 7th, and obviously are continuing to do so since. And we've got team members, as well as in London, we've got team members, you may be aware, Mark Levy in Manchester and Leo Brosh in Leeds, who cover the northwest and northeast of England, respectively. And since October 7th, a new government transition group was established just prior to the July general election, with representation from the JLC, the Board of Deputies, Labour Friends of Israel, and the London Jewish Forum, who are working together on an agreed list of issues to address with members of the new government and shadow politicians as appropriate, and that work is obviously ongoing. And then last but not least, Project 9, the creation of a communal hub to share and cascade information across the whole community. This doesn't sit discreetly within any of the 4 strategic objectives of Forge the Future, really because it cuts across all of them. And work has begun. We've had various discussions, in fact, with the Jewish News to scope out a project plan and develop a community for the development of a community hub website, which we envisage will include an easy to navigate directory of Jewish organizations, schools, shuls, etc., as well as details of communal events, a jobs board and volunteering opportunities. And our next steps will be to convene a focus group meetings with key organizations who would be involved in its development to ensure that whatever is built is done so with them on board and with their input. And I'm very aware of the Jewish Small Communities Network, your own website, and quite how I was astounded when I saw it and saw quite how much information is already on there. So obviously whatever might be taken forward within this project would of course link to the JSCN's website. And another hub type project is also in the works that we called an activation hub that would allow grassroots and mainstream organizations running campaigns to easily connect with individuals who'd like to get involved. So at top level, that's a really speedy whistle-stop tour of where we're up to with Forge the Future. There's still loads to do, and we appreciate it's a very ambitious project, but we feel pleased at this point on the amount that has been achieved so far. And noting the audience that I'm addressing, I want to reassure you that we are very much engaging with a number of people beyond the M25, both in terms of participation across the groups and the various projects being developed, and of course in the reach of what we're trying to achieve in delivering the many different actions. It's obviously a nationwide reach that we're aiming for pretty much across the board. So in the panel session after lunch, I'm happy to take any questions, and I'll put in the chat now if anyone wants to be in touch, either specifically on the sort of 2 asks that I've mentioned, either contacts of significant leaders in large organizations and or knowledge of lawyers that you think would be up for doing pro bono legal work. Or if you want to find out more details about any of the projects, then please feel free to get in touch with me. I'll put my email in the chat, and I will stop sharing.
Thanks very much, Claire. Okay, so a lot to take in there, but any more questions can come in the panel, and I'm sure you can make contact with Claire outside of this meeting as well. We'll be, like I said, we'll be sharing the details so that you can do that with any of the people who presented today. I thank you so much. There's a lot of information which you've taken on board. Thank you to Ite, to Timna, who's left us now, to Claire, to Alex, and of course to Julia, for coming on and giving us such a view of where we are in the community, in the fallout from October the 7th here in the UK, and particularly in our small communities.